My state-of-the-art fortress was designed to protect my son from every danger, but the greatest threat was the guardian angel I welcomed inside, a woman intent on erasing his past and claiming his future. They say money can't buy happiness, but it can buy security. It can buy a fortress. After my wife, Eleanor, passed away, that's what I tried to build for my son, Leo. Our home wasn't just a house, it was a state-of-the-art sanctuary on a cliff overlooking the ocean, a glass and steel testament to the fortune I'd built from nothing. Every window was shatterproof. Every door had a biometric lock, and a dedicated security team monitored the perimeter 24/7. Inside these walls, the world couldn't touch us. Inside these walls, I could protect the only thing that mattered anymore, my 7-year-old son. But a fortress needs more than technology to function. It needs people. And the most important person in our fortress, the one who held the key to its heart, was Clara. Clara came to us a year after Eleanor's death, recommended by an exclusive agency that catered to people like me. Her resume was flawless, her references impeccable. She was in her late 40s with a calm demeanor and kind eyes that seemed to absorb all the chaos and grief in a room and leave only peace behind. She was hired as a housekeeper, but she quickly became so much more. She was Leo's confidant, the one who could coax a smile out of him on his darkest days. She was the one who remembered he liked his sandwiches cut into triangles, not squares. She was the one who organized his playdates, managed his schedule, and filled the silence of our massive home with the scent of freshly baked cookies and a sense of normalcy we desperately craved. Leo adored her. He would run to her the moment she arrived, his small arms wrapping around her waist. "Clara!" he'd shout, his face buried in her apron, and she would scoop him up, her laughter echoing in the marble foyer. She became the soft place for him to land when my world of board meetings and international calls kept me at a distance. I trusted her implicitly. My son's happiness was the only metric I cared about, and by that standard, Clara was worth more than any stock in my portfolio. I saw her not as an employee, but as family, a guardian angel sent to mend our broken little world. The first crack in that perfect facade was almost invisible, so small I nearly dismissed it. I keep a small amount of cash in a desk drawer in my home office, a few $1,000s, nothing I'd ever notice if it were gone. It's an old habit from before I made my fortune. One evening, I went to grab a few hundred for the pizza delivery guy, a rare treat for Leo and me, and noticed the stack was thinner than I remembered. I counted it. $2,000 were missing. My first reaction wasn't anger, but confusion. It couldn't be Clara. She had access to everything, and if she wanted to steal, she could have taken far more valuable things than a bit of petty cash. I thought of the cleaning crew, the landscapers, the pool maintenance guy. A breach in my fortress, no matter how small, was unacceptable. It was the principle of it, the violation. So I did what I always do when faced with a problem. I turned to technology. I didn't want to make baseless accusations. I wanted data. The next day, I had a security firm install a new system. Not the visible kind on the ceilings, but micro cameras. They were seamlessly integrated into smoke detectors, light fixtures, even the digital photo frames on the shelves. They were everywhere, covering every major room, including my office, the living room, and Leo's playroom. I felt a pang of guilt, a sense of Orwellian unease about spying on the inner sanctum of my own home, especially on Clara. But I told myself it was a diagnostic tool, a temporary measure to find the weak link in my security. For the first week, I checked the feed sporadically. The footage was mind-numbingly dull. It was a highlight reel of Clara's perfection. I saw her patiently helping Leo with his homework, her finger tracing the words in his reader. I saw her build an elaborate Lego castle with him, her face alight with genuine joy. I saw her tending to the house with meticulous care. I saw nothing out of the ordinary, and the cash in my drawer remained untouched. I started to feel foolish, paranoid. Maybe I had just miscounted the money. I began to check the feeds less and less, letting the system run in the background, forgotten. The event that dragged me back to the screen was, once again, small, insignificant on its own. I was tucking Leo into bed one night the way Eleanor used to. He was quiet, tracing patterns on his duvet with his finger. "Daddy," he said, his voice small. "Is Mommy coming back from her long trip soon?" I felt the familiar clench in my chest. "We've talked about this, buddy. Mommy's in a place where she can't come back from, but she's watching over us. She loves you very much." He nodded slowly. "Clara says she's in a better place now. She says, sometimes people get a new mommy, a special one who is chosen just for them." A cold dread, sharp and unexpected, trickled down my spine. It was probably nothing. A clumsy but well-intentioned attempt to explain a difficult concept to a child. That had to be it. But the wording, a special one who is chosen, it felt rehearsed, programmed. It didn't sound like something you say to a grieving child. It sounded like something you say to plant an idea. That night, after Leo was asleep, I went to my office and pulled up the security feed archive. My hands felt cold as I navigated to the camera in Leo's room. I didn't know what I was looking for, but the unease in my gut was a roaring fire. I scrubbed through days of footage, hours of Clara reading bedtime stories, tucking him in, turning on his nightlight. It was all perfect. Too perfect. Then I found it. It was from 2 nights ago. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m. Leo was fast asleep, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. The door to his room creaked open, and a silhouette slipped inside. It was Clara. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why was she in his room in the middle of the night? She didn't turn on the light. She moved with a silent, practiced grace to his bedside. For a long moment she just stood there, watching him. The infrared camera cast her in an eerie gray light, her features flattened, her expression unreadable. Then she slowly knelt down, her face just inches from his. I leaned closer to my monitor, straining to see. She wasn't just looking at him, she was whispering. The camera's microphone was sensitive, designed to pick up the faintest sounds. I cranked up the volume, and her voice, a venomous, syrupy whisper, filled my ears. "Such a good boy," she cooed, so softly it was almost a hiss. "So trusting. You don't need to remember her. You don't need those old memories." My blood ran cold. Her? Old memories. Then she reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled something out. It was a small, rectangular object. I squinted at the grainy footage, trying to make it out. She held it up in the dim light, angling it towards Leo's sleeping face. It was a photograph, a small, framed photograph. I zoomed in, the pixels sharpening into a horribly familiar image. It was the picture of Eleanor I kept on my bedside table. Clara was holding a picture of my dead wife. And then I saw what she did next. Her other hand reached out, not to caress Leo, but to gently pry his small sleeping fingers open. With surgical precision, she slipped a small, single-edged razor blade from her sleeve, and with the photo of my wife in one hand and the blade in the other, she leaned over my son's bed. I watched, paralyzed, my breath caught in my throat as she carefully, deliberately began to slice away at the photograph, right over my sleeping son's open palm. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I could only watch in frozen shock as tiny, confetti-like pieces of my wife's smiling face rained down into his hand. For a full minute, I was part of the chair, fused to the leather by a cold, paralyzing terror. My screensaver, a picture of Leo and Eleanor laughing on a sailboat, flickered to life, a ghost of the happiness this woman was trying to methodically dismember. The image broke the spell. A rage so pure and white-hot, it felt like swallowing fire surged through me. My first instinct was primal, to storm down the hall, to drag that monster out of my son's room and throw her from the cliffs my house was built on. But I am not a man ruled by instinct. I am a man who builds empires, who anticipates his opponent's moves 10 steps ahead. Screaming would give her power. It would give her the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. It would terrify Leo. No. She thought she was moving in the shadows, but I owned the shadows. She was a cancer in my house, and you don't get rid of cancer by screaming at it. You cut it out with cold precision. I watched the feed until she finally slipped out of Leo's room, as silent as she had entered. The moment her own door clicked shut, I was moving. I glided down the hallway, every nerve ending screaming. I eased open Leo's door. He was still sound asleep, a picture of innocence. I knelt by his bed, my heart a trip hammer in my chest. His little hand was curled into a loose fist. I gently, so gently, uncurled his fingers. There they were, dozens of tiny, razor-sharp pieces of paper, like poisonous confetti. They were so small they almost looked like dust on his skin. I could make out a sliver of Eleanor's blue eye, a curve of her smile. My breath hitched. This wasn't just an act of insanity. It was a ritual, a systematic desecration. I carefully brushed the fragments into a tissue, my fingers trembling with contained fury. Then I sat by his bed for the rest of the night, watching him breathe, my own personal sentinel against the evil I had willingly invited into our lives. When the sun began to paint the sky, I forced myself to move, to put the mask back on. The morning was an exercise in gut-wrenching hypocrisy. Clara floated into the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune, her face the picture of warm benevolence. "Good morning, Mr. Davenport. Good morning, Leo, my little star," she chirped, placing a plate of perfectly browned pancakes, cut into the shape of dinosaurs, in front of my son. Leo beamed. "Clara, you remembered." "Of course I did," she said, ruffling his hair. Her eyes met mine over his head, and she gave me a gentle, knowing smile, the kind of smile that said, "See, I'm the one who truly cares for him." I wanted to vomit. I smiled back. A rictus grin stretched across my face. "Thank you, Clara. We don't know what we'd do without you." Every word was acid in my mouth. As soon as she was occupied with Leo, I made the call. I didn't call my head of security. This was too personal, too delicate. I called a man named Roman, a fixer I've kept on a very quiet, very expensive retainer for years. Roman doesn't find missing servers or plug security leaks. He finds missing people and digs up buried lives. "Roman," I said, my voice low and steady, "I have a name for you. Clara Bellwether. The agency was Sterling Services. I want to know everything. Her real name, where she was born, who she had for breakfast this morning. I want to know the name of her first pet. I want to know every skeleton in her closet, and I want them gift-wrapped on my desk by tonight. The file the agency gave me is a lie. Start there." The rest of the day was a blur of feigned normalcy. I worked from my home office, but my eyes were glued to the split-screen monitor showing the live feeds. I watched her play with Leo in the garden. I watched her read to him. Every gentle touch looked like a contamination, every kind word a carefully crafted lie. I saw her plan now with sickening clarity. She wasn't just a thief or a grifter. She was staging a psychological coup. Erase the mother. Isolate the son. Ingratiate herself with the father. Step into the void. Become the new matriarch of the Davenport dynasty. My fortune, my legacy, and my son all gift-wrapped and handed over. Late in the afternoon, she told me she was taking Leo to the local community pool for his swim lesson. It was part of their weekly routine. "We'll be back by 5, just in time for dinner," she said, her smile never faltering. This was my chance. The moment her car cleared the main gate, I was sprinting towards her room. The maid's quarters in my house were more like a small luxury apartment, but it was her space, her fortress, and I was about to breach it. I didn't need to pick the lock. I had the master code. The air inside was thick with the scent of lavender and something else, something cloying and sweet. It was obsessively neat. The bed was made with military precision, the clothes in the closet organized by color. It was the room of a person with immense discipline. A cold chill went down my back. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a long, calculated campaign. Under her bed, I found a locked footlocker. It took me less than 30 seconds with a crowbar from the garage. I pried it open, my heart pounding. It wasn't full of stolen jewelry or cash. It was full of us, my family. There were dozens of photos, not just prints from magazines, but candid shots. Pictures of Leo and me at the park, of us leaving a restaurant. Pictures taken from a distance with a long focus lens. She hadn't just been working for me. She had been studying us, stalking us. Beneath the photos was a thick, leather-bound journal. I flipped it open. Her handwriting was a tight, controlled script. It was filled with entries about Leo, about me, but they weren't diary entries. They were Notes. Observations. Leo responds positively to physical affection after being denied screen time. Mr. D is most vulnerable late at night, susceptible to conversations about his wife. And then, a line that made the blood drain from my face. Phase 1. Memory weaning is nearly complete. He rarely asks about Eleanor now. It's time to prepare him for Phase 2. My phone buzzed in my pocket, shaking me from my stupor. It was a secured message from Roman. I opened the encrypted file, the preliminary report. It was short, terse, but it hit me like a physical blow. Subject is not Clara Bellwether, the first line read. Identity is a complete fabrication. Real name identified via facial recognition and fingerprint match from a juvenile record. Subject's name is Abigail Fuller. She was sealed in a juvenile psychiatric facility for arson at age 16. But that's not the part you need to know. I scrolled down, my thumb shaking. There was another line of text, and below it, a scanned document. It was a birth certificate. Abigail Fuller's birth certificate. I read the names listed for her parents. The father's name meant nothing to me. But the mother's maiden name. I stared at it, my world tilting on its axis. The mother's maiden name was Jensen. Eleanor's maiden name was Jensen. I read it again, my mind refusing to process the impossible truth staring back at me. This woman, this monster sleeping 30 feet from my son, wasn't just some obsessive stranger. She was Eleanor's sister, the one Eleanor always called the troubled one, the one the family had cut ties with decades ago. The sister she had told me died in a fire. The birth certificate felt like a burning coal in my hand. Eleanor's sister, Abigail. The name was a ghost, a half-remembered whisper from the early days of our marriage. Eleanor had spoken of her only once, her face clouded with a sadness so deep it was almost fear. She was lost to us a long time ago, she had said, her voice tight, closing the subject with a finality that brooked no further questions. I had respected her pain and never asked again. A fire. That was the story. A tragic accident that had claimed the life of her deeply troubled younger sister. A lie. A lie Eleanor had told me to protect me, to protect herself from this woman who now had her hands on my son. My mind raced, connecting horrible, jagged pieces of a puzzle I never knew existed. The stolen cash wasn't for greed. It was a test, a way to see if I was paying attention, if the fortress was as secure as I thought. The stalking, the photos, the obsessive notes, this wasn't a recent fixation. This was a lifelong obsession, a vendetta. Abigail hadn't just appeared in our lives. She had clawed her way in, wearing the skin of a perfect stranger, to reclaim something she believed was hers. Eleanor got the life, the husband, the money, the child. She got the fairy tale. And Abigail, her shadow sister, got a psychiatric ward and a fabricated death. I slammed the footlocker shut, the noise echoing in the pristine silence of her room. I had to get out, had to think. I strode back to my office, the journal clutched in my hand like a holy relic of her madness. Phase 2, it said. What the hell was Phase 2? I frantically flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the tight, venomous script. The entries became more recent, more detailed. She documented Leo's every mood swing, his every dream he shared with her. She was mapping his psyche. Then I found the last entry, dated the night before. He is ready. The final threads connecting him to the ghost are severed. Tomorrow at the pool the baptism can begin. He will be washed clean of her memory and reborn as my son. The water will be our witness. His old life will drown, and his new one will begin with me. Mr. D will see how much Leo needs me, how he clings to me. He will have no choice but to accept the new order. The pool, the baptism, drown. The words leapt off the page and wrapped themselves around my throat. It wasn't a metaphor. This wasn't just psychological warfare anymore. She was going to do something to him. At the pool. Today. Now. I glanced at the clock on my monitor. 4:42 p.m. They were due back by 5. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I dialed my head of security. Mark. Mark, code red, I barked, my voice strained. Full lockdown, but not here. I need you and 2 of your best men at the Community Aquatic Center on Shoreline Drive. Now, don't go in. Seal the exits. No one in or out until I get there. Do not let her see you. Do you understand? Sir? What's going on? Just do it, I roared, hanging up before he could ask another question. I snatched my car keys and sprinted for the garage, Abigail's journal still in my hand. The drive to the pool was a 10-minute nightmare of red lights and slow-moving traffic. Every second was an eternity. My mind played a horror film of possibilities. Her holding Leo under the water, his little arms flailing. Her saving him at the last possible second, emerging as the hero who rescued him from a tragic accident, binding him to her forever, with trauma and gratitude. I screeched into the parking lot. Mark's black SUV was parked discreetly across the street. He gave a subtle nod as I got out. I ran towards the entrance, my heart feeling like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. The humid, chlorinated air of the indoor pool hit me like a wall. The place was noisy, filled with the echoes of splashing children and laughing parents. My eyes scanned the crowded pool, searching for Leo's bright red swimming trunks. There, at the far end, in the deep water section. It was them, but they weren't swimming. Clara Abigail was standing on the edge of the pool, her back to me. She was holding Leo's hand. He was looking up at her, his face a mixture of confusion and trust. She was talking to him, her expression one of serene, almost beatific calm. Even from this distance I could see the unnatural intensity in her eyes. The other children were splashing and playing, but Leo and Abigail were in their own bubble, a pocket of terrifying stillness amidst the chaos. She knelt down, bringing her face level with his. She pointed to the water, then to the sky. She was whispering to him, her hand gently stroking his hair. I started moving towards them, a low growl building in my throat. I tried to walk, not run, not to cause a scene, not to spook her, but every step felt like I was wading through molasses. Then she stood up, pulling Leo with her. She led him to the high dive platform. No one was using it. She gestured for him to climb the ladder. He hesitated, looking back at her. She smiled, a radiant, terrifying smile, and gave him a little nudge. He started to climb. My pace quickened. Leo! I wanted to scream his name, but my throat was closed tight with fear. She was right behind him, her hand on the small of his back, guiding him up the ladder. They reached the top of the platform, a 10-foot drop into the deep blue water below. They looked so small up there, silhouetted against the large glass windows of the facility. She turned him around to face her. She held both of his small hands in hers. She was speaking to him again, her head bowed as if in prayer. I was closer now, maybe 50 feet away. I could hear the faint murmur of her voice, but not the words. Leo just stared at her, mesmerized, captivated. Then she did something that stopped me dead in my tracks. She let go of his hands. She reached into the small bag she had slung over her shoulder and pulled out a small, metallic object. It glinted under the fluorescent lights. It was a padlock, a heavy, industrial-looking padlock. She took Leo's ankles, one at a time, and wrapped something around them, a chain, thin but strong. And then, with a sickeningly deliberate motion, she clicked the padlock shut, binding his small feet together. The metallic click of the padlock echoed in my head, louder than all the splashing and shouting in the building. It was the sound of a closing cage, the sound of my son's life being sealed away. Time seemed to warp, stretching and thinning. I saw Leo look down at his bound ankles, a flicker of confusion on his face, but not fear. Never fear. He trusted her. That was the most horrific part of it all. He trusted the monster who was about to sacrifice him on her twisted altar of vengeance. That trust, that pure, innocent faith in the woman who baked him cookies and read him stories, broke through my paralysis. A sound tore from my throat, a guttural roar that was pure instinct, pure father. Leo! Every head in the aquatic center turned. The joyous cacophony died down to a stunned silence. Abigail's head snapped up, her eyes locking with mine across the shimmering blue expanse of the pool. For a split second, her mask of serene benevolence crumbled, revealing the raging, hateful furnace beneath. Her plan had been derailed. The quiet, psychological baptism was now a public spectacle, but she wasn't giving up. Her eyes narrowed, and with a speed that defied her calm demeanor, she placed her hands on Leo's small shoulders. This was it. Phase 2. She wasn't going to save him. She was going to execute him. Drowning him was the final act, a way to erase Eleanor's bloodline and leave me a shattered, broken man who would have no one to turn to but her. "No!" I bellowed, launching myself forward. I didn't run around the pool. I ran through it. I hit the shallow end with a massive splash, churning through the waist-deep water, parents snatching their children out of my path. The water felt like quicksand, slowing me, fighting me. Up on the platform, Abigail shoved Leo. He teetered on the edge for a horrifying moment, a tiny, shackled marionette. His wide eyes were fixed on me, his father, the man who was supposed to be his fortress, who was now failing him in the most fundamental way. Then he fell. He hit the water with a small, quiet splash that felt like a cannon blast in the now silent room. He sank instantly, a stone in bright red trunks, dragged down by the weight of the chain. There were screams then, from the other parents, shouts of confusion and horror. I didn't hesitate. I dove forward, into the deep end, my eyes burning from the chlorine, desperately searching the distorted blue depths. I saw him. He was on the bottom, about 12 feet down, a small dark shape. He wasn't struggling, he was just sinking. I kicked down, my lungs screaming for air, my expensive suit jacket billowing around me like a shroud. I reached him, my fingers fumbling for the padlock. It was cold and solid and impossible. There was no key. Of course there was no key. She would have thrown it away. My vision started to tunnel. I grabbed Leo, wrapping my arms around his chest and kicked for the surface with every ounce of strength I had left. We broke the surface, gasping. I held his head above the water, the dead weight of the chain and padlock trying to pull us both back down. "Help!" I choked out, treading water frantically. Lifeguards were diving in. Mark and his men were storming the building, their faces grim. They reached us, helping me get Leo to the side of the pool. His face was pale, his lips blue. He was unconscious, but he was breathing. The medics, whom Mark had had the foresight to call, were already there, working on him, cutting the chain with bolt cutters. I scrambled out of the pool, shivering, my eyes scanning for Abigail. She was gone from the diving platform. For a heart-stopping second, I thought she'd slipped away. Then I saw her. She was standing near the exit, surrounded by Mark's men. She wasn't fighting. She wasn't screaming. She was just standing there, her hair dripping, her face a mask of utter tranquility. She looked at me, at the chaos she had created, and she smiled. It was a smile of triumph. She might have lost the battle, but in her mind she had won the war. She had shown me how fragile my fortress was, how easily she could reach in and crush the only thing I loved. The weeks that followed were a blur of police statements, lawyers, and child psychologists. Abigail, or Clara, never said another word. She sat in her cell, smiling that same serene, terrifying smile. The journal was the key. It laid out her entire narcissistic, psychopathic plan in meticulous detail. Coupled with the footage from the hidden cameras, the whispered poison in Leo's room, the ritualistic destruction of Eleanor's photograph, it painted a picture so monstrous that she was deemed unfit to stand trial. She was sent back to the kind of sealed psychiatric facility she had clawed her way out of, this time for good. Roman's final report revealed the depth of the family tragedy. Abigail had been the unstable one, jealous and volatile. Eleanor had been the golden child. The fire hadn't been an accident that killed Abigail. It had been a fire Abigail started in a fit of rage, trying to burn down their family home with Eleanor inside. That was the event that got her institutionalized and erased from the family history. Her escape and the creation of the Clara Bellwether identity had been the work of years, a masterpiece of manipulation and patience, all for a final, twisted reunion with the sister who, in her mind, had stolen her life. Our fortress on the cliff no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a tomb filled with ghosts and bad memories, so I sold it. We moved to a smaller house in a quiet neighborhood with a big yard and a golden retriever. There are no biometric locks or shatterproof windows, just a home filled with the sound of Leo's laughter and the smell of my own. often burnt attempts at baking cookies. Leo is resilient. The psychologists say that because he was so young, the trauma is more of a dark dream than a sharp memory. He knows Clara was a bad person who tried to hurt him, but the intricate details are fading, thankfully. Sometimes late at night, I'll stand in his doorway and just watch him sleep, my heart aching with a love that is fiercer and more fragile than I ever knew. Money can't buy happiness, and it can't buy real security either. Security isn't a wall or a camera. It's vigilance. It's trust, earned and tested. It's holding your child's hand and knowing, without a shadow of a doubt, that you are the one who will never, ever let go. Abigail thought she could drown my son and take my life, but all she did was drown the man I used to be, the detached billionaire in his glass tower. And from those cold, chlorinated waters, a father was reborn.